I like absurdities. The picture that's chosen for the exhibition isn't absurd. It's about my pain, but the pleasure of my drawings comes from my sense of the absurdity of everyday life. Well, that particular image, I think, is quite shocking. What is phantom limb pain anyway? Nobody knows what it is. They can't imagine it, just a sort of tingling of the missing limb. Well, what is it then? Oh, it's very sharp, or it's burning. Oh yeah, I understand. No, they don't. So I wanted to give a graphic representation of pain and how it rips you apart and cloaks you.
This one is about trying to paint how it feels to be having a bad migraine experience and trying to combine the busyness of a feeling with the absolute void of thought, which I find is something unique to migraines, and that's why I did a whole series on them. I used black acrylic paint and sunblood because there seems to be no easier way of showing pain. I wouldn't have the insight that I have without the slightly different wiring that I have. I've been given a way of seeing the world that I'm told is unusual. Every time I successfully communicate just a tiny bit of that, it's the best feeling in the world.
Well, I was doing a piece of performance based on the idea of the back of beyond. I often draw me as a cell because, you know, they're the building blocks of all of us for everything. So it was just like this cell floating in like a deep red expanse, a kind of psychological back of the beyond. There's ink, there's charcoal, there's paint, there's chalk, there's pencil crayon, there's a graphite stick. And that's just in that, I mean, you wouldn't look at it and think it had that many mediums in it. It does. It's a weird little image that actually is quite powerful, but it works.
I decorated it. I used the straws to add them to its colour. It took me 10 hours to make this thing. I've just added the white straws and snipped them in half. And I also done the eyes and the lips. And I've also done some patterns up there. Up there, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Yep. I like doing art, using chalk, using colouring pencils, or pens. It looks good. It looks really good. It
does?
Yeah.
I grew up on the Pepys estate in Deptford, and I lived on that estate for 8 years with my family until it kind of got too much and we had to move off. It was very rough. Kind of culminated in someone throwing a milk bottle at my mum. Aside from kind of the childhood experiences, I'm starting to weave in a lot of historical narrative into the paintings. So Abbatoir, on the site of the Pepys estate, aside from the naval dockyard, there was also a huge cattle market. What that painting really is a kind of a fusion of the gangs of old who worked there, you know, who used to work on the docks there, and the gangs of today. And I'm in that painting as well, but you know, so those three things are kind of fused together. The river, the artery of London, is actually kind of like, you know, there's references and there's metaphors for my arteries because I grew up on the river.
That's why I like doing art, doing painting, drawing, and like drawing portraits. And yeah, we had a trip to London to go to the National Portrait, go and look at the exhibition, other things, yes. So I copied it from a photograph, that one. They're just done by acrylics, these. Yeah, sometimes, and they use those like water pencils and sort of water them in, yes. Yeah, I enjoy it, yeah. Makes me feel happy.
It's a different kind of style that I went for in the painting. Last year I was using rippled glass as a sort of metaphor for sort of distorting reality and what we see. It's a distortion in this. So it's about the imagination playing tricks on you and thinking things that are real when they're not. So the pink rain, it could be a hand swearing or it could be a bottle of alcohol. So it's about changing perception through drink and perceiving in a different way, or trying to escape, basically.
A lot of my portraits are quite cheerful. I find looking at cheerful faces and something happy actually makes me feel better. I also find working with bright colours, that seems to lift my mood as well. And with the abstract, it's just doing something completely different from the portraiture, something a lot more freer, just playing about with colours and just seeing what happens, really. I was going through a bit of a bad patch at the time and was having trouble with anxiety and depression. And sort of shredded nerves basically sort of represents that in a way. I see certain things and then I've had somebody else look at that particular piece of work and they've seen something completely different. It's like there's a battle going on between the colours and the black, and which is like what I feel at times with dealing with depression.
I only sort of really make when I'm in the right mood, sort of thing, which is why sometimes it takes me years to make sort of pieces of art, and I've got to be in the right frame of mind for it, and sometimes I'm not, which is why it takes a while. Well, like all the writing on the back was just like a list of, I think it was just a jobs list that I did for like the week, and I think you can see it's like, I've written on there like, print out the jester, because I was like doing a jester which is all made of patterns, and finish, like, and then I can't read the rest of it because it's like part of his teeth. And I think what happened, it went down there, and I just sort of started messing around with biro, and then realised, oh, that looks like a hill, and then made that into a face, and it just sort of like flowed on from it. It's like I didn't plan any of it, it just was a doodle that ended up with a pattern fella eating a hill. It's like just always how it goes.
This is largely about the dubious delights of borderline personality disorder, but it's also about building on the past, learning to be yourself, living with the scars and remains of who you've been. It's a doll that I've had since I was a kid, which I took apart and put back together again, and some of the jewellery I've also had since I was a kid. I would just like them to look at it, and particularly to be a little more aware that sometimes you can't see what's wrong with somebody.
It started off as two sections with just these rounds. I was finding bits on the street, bits of plastic and bits of I don't know what they were like. I was baffled by them, so I started collecting them. I put these blue things here, and someone said it looked like a nuclear power station, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. Like I'll make it into a nuclear sort of thing. Like, the story is these are power stations. And it's like a barren land, there's been a nuclear war and there's snow on the ground, and this is supposed to be a teleport machine, there's a person there and a robot there and an explosion here, and there's a lot going on, like a spacecraft there, and it's like supposed to be a picture of the future, like sort of how it would be if a nuclear bomb went off, and what a mess there'd be like.
Over the last several years, I've been working in painting and drawing specifically, and occasionally work with video as well and sculpture. The selected artwork that I have in the show is one that I made in Cornwall in the Atlantic Ocean. The plywood enabled me to have that kind of surface, that buoyant platform, if you like, to paint upon. The media that I chose is simply oil paint together with a dinosaur bone, and so I was really intrigued and curious about taking this inanimate bone fragment and animating it once again.
That is my wish, is the wish pond, and it always has been. It's just, you know, in my head. the wish pond. Well, that actually was very, very basic. All it was like very thin lines and circles. Not so much balls, circles that like had circles in, you know, very thin. And it was just, and I quite liked it like that. But then I just kept seeing different things. And then it just grew into that. I mean, it did take quite a few years on and off, you know, you just sort of carried it around and it just grew into that. I think with my paints, they actually make people think, I don't know what about, but they stand there for a long time, like looking at them, and then they'll go away and come back, like, so I don't know what they're thinking, but they're making them think something.
I think over the years I've developed a sense of composition, and I love line, and there are certain colours which appeal to me. So I applied them, you know, I applied them there, and I like scratching, you know, I scratched in it, you know, that kind of thing. And then when it was selected, I was absolutely delighted. And I thought, I've got to give it a title. So I looked at it, and in a way it's got a figurative element, and I call them helpers. So that's what I call them, was helpers, mysterious beings. And that's it, really. If I could paint everyday scenes successfully and make a living at it, I'd be doing that, but I can't. I've tried, you know, I think I've got to make some money and paint some boats, you know, and it just doesn't work. So I come back to what I'm doing, because it's got a kind of an integrity and a kind of honesty in doing that, you know.
On the Act is the euphemism, I suppose, or it's a prison term that applies to anyone who's been deemed a risk to themselves. And it signifies that the prison system has an extra duty of care in order to try and prevent that prisoner from self-harming. However, in my experience, in the 3 prisons that I've been in, that generally involves all of their possessions being taken away, and sometimes it involves the loss of phone calls, the loss of visits, try and stop these people from self-harming. Obviously, anyone with a conscience knows that that doesn't work. The other thing about the painting is that it's the prisoner is gagged, and thankfully I've never personally had experience of self-harm, but I knew people inside who were self-harmers, and they talked to me about no one cares what they say. You know, there's a gag in place, I suppose.
So I live on the edge of Dartmoor, and it's, yeah, the landscape's always inspired me, so that's kind of what I base my work on. So I do a lot of drawing out on the moor, and then come back to my little cubby hole here and start sort of painting from my drawings. Kappa was the name of an quite famous Aboriginal artist, and he was one of the first Aboriginal artists to incorporate that whole mix of subjective and objective view on one piece of art. And when I was doing that painting, that was in my mind as well, because I was mixing the above view and the subjective view as well. I guess in some ways it was a little bit of a tribute to him, really. Yeah.
All these are inspired by Marvel Comics. I've got various characters. I've made over 40 of my own cards. Pencil first, and then I've got some sort of pen and ink. You can go over the pencil and rub away the pencil. Also help if you've got decent felt tip pens. I feel quite satisfied by the end product. So this one, for instance, this one's probably taken me at least 3 or 4 hours to complete. But I wouldn't do just one block, 3 or 4. I'd spend maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time on it. I hope they get inspired, sort of thing. Look at it and think, oh, I'll get myself some pens and I'll get some ink and stuff, and I'll have a go myself. So.
As a child, I spent time staying at my grandparents' home in a small Wiltshire village called Easton Grey. The tiny village was beautiful. It had an old bridge over the River Avon, and I used to sketch the cottages, old black and white photos that my nan had. It fed my creative mind, I guess. I later studied fashion and textiles at Salisbury. I started a family, enjoyed doing messy art with my kids, but I hadn't done any work of my own for a long time. A few years ago, I hit a spell of depression and anxiety. I felt the need to be creative again, so I looked for an art group to join and found Zap Arts, a group in Poole for people with mental health issues. It has been a lifesaver. I started to sketch again, to explore work with clay and photography. When I am being creative, my anxiety reduces. I feel calmer. Learning new skills gives me a challenge and a sense of achievement. Hopefully, after seeing this exhibition, other people may become interested in taking up art. It may help others to reduce anxiety, depression, and bring some calm into their lives too.
I started drawing in the 80s, and I tried to apply for art colleges but was turned down. By chance, my work made it onto the first recycled card range for Athena, and some of my cartoons were used for a place that I used to work at. After one thing and another, though, I did drift away from making art altogether. I love animals and nature and usually do something along those lines. Hounds and horses tend to be included in quite a bit of my work. I make figures now. I prefer 3D work. On the odd occasion I have done pictures, but I do prefer 3D. Art occupies my mind. I have a problem with short-term memory, and making things doesn't require that much grey matter, but I still write lists of what to do next. Getting work completed is pleasing, though I am never really fully content with the results. I would like viewers of my work just to think of humour, hopefully. Nothing seems so dark in this world if you can chuckle away at it.